Hey everybody, welcome to DirectX 11 tutorial 40. I know it's been about a week since I've made a tutorial. I've just been a bit busy. In this tutorial, this is going to be the last tutorial where we are going to go over blending, just to show a few more things that you need to be concerned with when you are using blending. As we've already discovered, when we are rendering objects that have an alpha, we want to render them after our solid objects. So, first we'll render our solid objects, and then at the end, for our example, the pink texture is transparent, so we'll render that at the end. However, there are some other things that we need to keep in mind as well. So, to demonstrate this, I'm actually going to take out, I'm going to take out our pavement and grass squares we were drawing, and I'm going to change the pink texture. The pink square that we had that was see-through, it's going to use the pavement texture. So let's see, where was that? Change the pink texture to the pavement texture. And if we go ahead and just test this real quick, just to make sure that there's not anything else we have to change. Okay, and you see now we just have our pavement texture. So what we are going to do is we are going to make a cube that has this pavement texture on each side. So let's close out of this, and let's go down to our vertices. And what I'm going to do is, we currently have the vertices for the front of the cube. I'm not really going to go into this real specifically, because we've already gone into how to how to make vertices for triangles and the square and whatnot. I'm just going to add in the vertices for the back of the cube. So first, for the front vertices, I'm going to change these to be closer to the camera, and it's going to be the same length as the distance from left to right for front to back. So we'll just use negative 0.5 for the Z, and that will be closer to the camera. And then for the back vertices, the ones that are further from the camera, we will use 0.5 for the Z. Now we have to set up the indices. So this was for the front, and I'm just going to cut the video and figure these out real quick and put these in. Okay, so that took a little bit longer than I had expected, but I have set up the indices for each of the sides on the cube. Now keep in mind, due to the way we're doing texture mapping and I'm reusing some of these vertices, the sides are going to look really weird, but the front and the back look normal for the texture. So we have our texture, and we have the sides where, because they have the same texture coordinate for the front and back, so it's just stretching it back, and then we have the back side. So you might notice if we turn down the transparency, we can't see the sides through it. And there are a couple of reasons why. So what's happening is, we're only rendering the triangles that are facing the camera, since we define them in clockwise order. And because our rasterizer is culling the triangles that are facing away from the camera. So you might think, okay, well, we can just go in our rasterizer and change it to not cull. So let's try that and see what happens. I believe it was up in our initialize DirectX. Let's see. Alright, and we are currently culling back. So let's try to cull none. So we won't cull any of our triangles, regardless of if they're facing the camera or not. And let's see what that looks like. Alright, well, we get some interesting results. So, you see, if I'm looking at this through this front piece, I can't see, through it at all. I actually have to go through it. And if I'm looking through this right side, I'm able to see through to the front and to the back. And if I look through the back, I'm able to see the front through the back. So, the question here is, how come I can see the front through the back, but I can't see the back through the front? what's happening is, so even though that we are not culling any of the triangles, we are still doing the depth test. And what's happening is, in this situation, let's say the front is being drawn first. Well, the back is being drawn after it, and since it is further away from the camera, it's not being rendered. So one solution to this, which would be fine for something like UI, where it's just on your screen and doesn't move, would be to not include the depth test. However, we can't do that for 3D objects necessarily because they will show through other objects. So just to demonstrate that, let's go to our depth stencil, and we are going to change the comparison function from less than equal to always. So it should just always draw no matter what the depth is. And you see now it's like, okay, cool, well, we can completely see through all of these sides. However, this will present a big problem when we are drawing other 3D objects. For example, I'm going to add in another cube, and I'm going to have it be fully opaque. And I'm going to just have it be a little bit further back, let's say. And for that, I will use the grass texture. So let's test this out. Can't redefine alpha. Let's see. Okay. So you see, we have our grass texture, our cube back here with the grass texture on it, and we can see the grass texture through our pavement texture, which it's like, okay, yeah, that's what's expected. However, here's the problem with disabling the depth stencil. Let's say that we are back at our grass texture, right? We are able to, I know this grass texture looks really weird. Let's try to ignore that. But that's another thing of the depth stencil. If we have an opaque object and we're not using the depth stencil, we get really strange results. But the fact that we're able to see the pavement through our grass, and our grass is not transparent at all, it just demonstrates why we can't just disable the depth stencil. So what is one kind of solution, not really a complete solution, but kind of a solution, is, I'm going to take out the grass cube, by the way. One thing that's kind of a solution is we could draw the object twice. Once where we just render the triangles that are facing away from the camera, and once where we render the triangles that are facing towards the camera. So first, let me restore the depth stencil back to how it was. So we are going to change the comparison to be less than equal. Now, down at our rasterizer, we are going to change this back to cull back. So what we need is we need another rasterizer where we can cull the front triangles, so we will only draw the triangles facing away from the camera, and then we can draw the triangles facing towards the camera. So let's go up to our graphics header, and we are going to create a new rasterizer. We're going to call this, let's put cull front, because it's culling the front. And we know that by default we will cull back, so I'll just leave the rasterizer state with that name. So back in our graphics CPP, we're going to create a new rasterizer state for culling front. You're going to change it to cull front. Okay, so now we have two rasterizer states, one for culling the front and one for culling the back. So let's go up to where we are rendering. What we could do is we could set our rasterizer state to cull the front. And then we could draw our triangles, and then we could change it to our default rasterizer state, and then draw the cube again. So first we're drawing the triangles that are in the back that we normally wouldn't be able to see. And then we are drawing the triangles that we would normally be able to see, the ones that are facing the camera. So if we test this out, so yeah, now you see we can see the back through the front. It's kind of, probably could have chosen a better texture, but you see the back through the front, and we see it through the sides, and we can see the front through the back. So that is one approach for this. You might have already thought, well, what if we have more complex objects? You know, it's not going to be perfect. This is, it works out for cubes, but there are objects that are, you know, more complex where it just doesn't work right. And I think there are way more complex ways to draw transparent objects if you need it to be perfect. But we'll probably not go into that because they are really, they really use up a lot of performance. But yeah, that is going to be the end of covering blending for now. I didn't want to devote too many tutorials to blending, but as you can see, there's just a lot that goes into it if you want to do it right. So that is all that we are going to cover for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, it's going to be more of a cleanup tutorial. We're going to try to shorten the code that we have in our graphics CPP because it's already about 437 lines. We can get it down a bit. We're going to look at some more detailed error logging to get stuff like the file it crashed on, the function, and the line number. And then after that tutorial, we will probably start to get into how we can load models.